Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Now that my two obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And Lobliner has released some of his medical info, talked about his TRT, and a few people have asked me to talk about it. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. All right, I went and watched the video, guys. You know, what I'm going to say about this is why there is oftentimes bias in the community against TRT, and they say, oh, guys on TRT are cheating or whatever they want to call it. What Mark is doing is not TRT, all right? It's prescription blasting or prescription cycling. He's basically got a doctor who's given him legal permission, which is fine, that's fine, to go ahead and have way more testosterone in his body than a human being has ever produced naturally. Including during adolescence, during puberty, any of that. His test levels are going to be off the chart. Now, to a lot of guys out there who are in that world, that doesn't seem like much, to be honest, because it's actually extremely conservative. Like, no person who's competing in pro bodybuilding would ever have test levels anywhere near as low. Even a fifth of what Mark is going to be at, all right? But if we are going to talk about what's really TRT, this is where this bias comes in. Because, you know, you get guys who say, hey, I'm on TRT, then what does everyone think? They automatically then think of guys like Mark who are sitting there, oh yeah, my doctor wants me at 1,500 nanograms per deciliter. That's higher than young men have during puberty. That's more testosterone than the highest tested young men have ever been found during puberty. That's beyond the extreme range. And for perspective here, guys, the normal range, when you go to your doctor and you get blood work, the healthy range, your baseline is considered anywhere between 300 and 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. Now, realistically speaking, if you're close to 300, you probably have somewhat low test. It's not medically low yet to the point to where you can get a prescription necessarily. A regular endocrinologist isn't going to help you at that point. Now, these longevity clinics might. And I don't have a personal problem with that. I just have a problem with people calling it TRT and pretending they're not blasting gear. But the 1,000 range is the extreme range. What people need to understand, when you start seeing people above about 800 or 900, that's about 1% of the population. Right? When you see a 900 plus testosterone, those are overproducers. In other words, when you're given a healthy range on a chart, that range also accounts for genetic anomalies. In other words, because men have been tested in the high 900s who had never taken anything, because some are occasionally found, again, we're talking about less than 1% of the healthy male population is ever going to be that high. It's left on the range. So you got guys like Mark who are like, well, I've been testing at 970. So in other words, his doctors had him all the way at the extreme range. In other words, his doctor has been keeping him at what we would call the genetically elite level for people who would be natural. People who are producing very, very high amounts compared to other men would be in the 900s. So he's got him up at that extreme range, right? So people want a reference. If they want a reference, what did my blood work test at? Mine's been around 700. You guys see the difference here? Your range is 300 to 1,000. My prescription puts me at about 700 nanograms per deciliter, right? No one's going to say, oh, that's not TRT, because I'm like 300 points below the top of the normal scale, the extreme range, the elite people. My testosterone is not as high as those guys, even on a script. And I'm very pro TRT for men who need it. And I don't think it's cheating. I don't think it's a bad thing. Is it cheating in the sense of you're cheating nature? Yeah. But who cares about nature? Like, I don't buy into the naturalistic fallacy that because something appears a certain way in nature that is the best way to be. No, I believe in better living through modern chemistry and modern medicine, right? Technological advancement. I don't have a problem with it. I think it's great if you have the legitimate need for it. And as we get older, a lot of us do. But if we're going to talk about health, fitness, we're going to actually talk about what's a real advantage here, guys. I'm sorry, but if you're sitting up close to 1,000, you're definitely going to gain extra muscle and other things from that a non-enhanced male would never, ever have. That's just how it's going to be. But this is where it gets crazy. You got guys like Mark who do that already, and other people are already going, I don't know, you're probably on about 200 milligrams a week already. You know, that's what people are thinking when they see that number around 1,000, and that's realistic. So they hear that, and then people automatically, because of guys like Mark doing this, who aren't really doing TRT, they're just getting their gear legally. And believe me, guys, I have no problem with that. I don't like the prohibition on this stuff. I would actually like to see the laws changed. As a libertarian, believer in freedom as far as things like that go, I would rather see it be less of a problem. I'm for decriminalization of a lot of substances out there that I think are just too restricted by the government. That's just how I feel about it, right? I mean, that includes cannabis, marijuana. I don't think that should be illegal at all. I think it's absurd that it's illegal. And I don't even smoke it. But I don't think it should be illegal. Not for consenting adults who choose to utilize it. It's just how I feel. Same thing with things like testosterone. Again, if you're a consenting adult, you know, I think if it was made illegal, the black market and everything else, and half the problems caused from the black market, that actually causes half the health problems people have. That's a big chunk of it. Would go away. You know what? We'd have less people in jail for dealing, distributing this stuff. It would be less work for all sorts of problems. You know, again, we could save a lot of tax dollars. The problem, though, again, you got guys doing that, and then it puts a connotation on TRT that, oh, guys are just getting TRT to get their levels way super high. And for the majority, that's not the case. That's not really what's going on. He's calling it TRT. Well, then, what's going on now? He's saying, my doctor thinks that because of my activity levels and stress and recovery needs, I need to be up in the 1,200 to 1,500 range. All right, guys, that's just basically using a moderate dose of testosterone with your doctor approving it. Which, again, from an ethical and moral and legal perspective, that's perfectly fine. I want to make that clear. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. If that's what a person chooses to do and they can get it legally, and their doctor will prescribe it, that's their own business. I'm not going to knock that. I want to make that clear. My problem is then calling it TRT and pretending that you're in the normal range. Because, guys, 1,200 is the upper threshold for young men going through puberty, right? The highest testosterone you will ever have in your life is during your mid-teens, right? Early to mid-teens. That is where you do see men go above 1,000. Well, boys go above 1,000. But even then, the majority will not go above 1,000. Like if you hit 900 during puberty, that's pretty much up there. That would be considered a very strong response. You occasionally see some up in the 1,000, 1,100 range. That's why they put 1,200 on the scale when it's been tested. But that's, again, a small minority of people. So now he's talking about 1,200 to 1,500. That is outside the range of what any of us produced during puberty. Now, do I think it's his right to do that? Sure. Should he be calling that TRT? Should he be saying that's necessarily healthy? I'm going to say no, and here's a couple of things to consider. Chronically elevated testosterone levels that high could start to contribute to health problems, right? Excessive red blood cell count, maybe a change in lipid profile, right? And I know he'll say, well, my lipid profile is great. Well, is it? Is your LDL elevated? And that's the other thing. He's saying I eat a lot of red meat. All right, guys, I'm not anti-red meat. I don't believe, other than a few things, the concept of good versus bad food. So I don't buy into this vegan, silly propaganda, oh, every drop of red meat is bad. But we know that saturated fat, large amounts of saturated fat, does seem to have a direct causation with elevated LDL cholesterol. Testosterone levels outside the normal range can contribute to elevated LDL cholesterol. What do we know about atherosclerosis? 4 people jump up and say, oh no, dietary cholesterol has nothing to do with blood cholesterol. That's right, it doesn't. For many people, there is no correlation. Depends on your genetics. But when we talk about saturated fat and LDL cholesterol, it elevates it. And this is kind of the death blow to the ketogenic diet. Most people on ketogenic diets, once their weight stabilizes and they stop losing weight quickly, their LDL tends to go up from all the saturated fat. We know now that saturated or that LDL cholesterol is the actual cause of atherosclerosis. So if you have chronically elevated LDL cholesterol, you are predisposing yourself to long-term heart disease. And that doesn't mean heart attack. We're not talking about heart attack. We're talking about hardening of the arteries. There's pretty well scientific consensus on that at this point. So what we have here, you have Mark saying, well, everything looks good, but, what's his LDL going to look like? And that is something to consider. I mean, Mark is in his 30s now. He's in his 30s. He says he's eating large amounts of red meat, and now he's going to basically push himself up to outside the normal range on testosterone under prescription of the doctor long term. But again, the doctor might not even be looking at his LDL. He might be looking at stuff like HDL to triglyceride ratios, because that's what you look at when you're looking for heart attack. But chronically elevated LDL is what you look at when we start looking at risk of hardening of your arteries, atherosclerosis, plaque buildup in your arteries. Because at this point, the leading experts in that field are saying we believe there's causation there now. It's not correlation any longer. They've got pretty strong data at this point. So yeah, if you've got elevated LDL, that's not a good thing, guys. That's not a good thing. And so this is something that Mark should probably be aware of. He should be thinking about before he starts pretending that he's really going to promote a healthy lifestyle. Because again, very large amounts of red meat, very elevated testosterone outside the normal range. He damn well better keep an idea on that. Now, here's what I'm going to say with that. All of that is still probably fine if his LDL doesn't go up. And so that's what you would look for. If his LDL starts becoming elevated because of his lifestyle, all right, that's potentially a problem. Hardening of the arteries, carrying an extra amount of body weight, that will put him at an extreme risk. That's not fitness. That's not healthy anymore. And that's the thing when it comes down to all this stuff. The level of risk involved varies from person to person. The level of long-term risk. Things like blood work will tell you a lot. So, at least the guy's getting blood work and everything. But where I've got a problem is that he better be looking closely at the LDL on what he's doing totally. And he needs to be honest with himself and honest with his audience about that. Otherwise, he's teaching stuff that is going to be potentially harmful to others and maybe not accepting that it's harmful to himself, because he also has this cognitive dissonance about his own products that he sells. He probably believes deep down and convinced himself that they're perfectly fine and they all work. The branched chain aminos actually help with muscle protein synthesis and stuff, in spite of the meta-analysis, because he's so invested in it. And a lot of guys who do gear, that is a problem there. There's that cognitive dissonance of, yes, their dangers have been overstated and demonized and overhyped. That's absolutely true. But a lot of guys who do that tend to go the other direction and then pretend that there's no risk at all. And that's certainly not true either. That's not true either. But ultimately, guys, at the end of the day, this is part of what gives TRT, which is actually a fantastic thing. It's life-changing for many, many men. What gives it a bad name is when guys are basically doing what's being done here and being prescribed super physiological amounts. It pushed them outside of the level that even they had when they were 14 years old. Come on. It's not TRT. And I don't have a problem with him doing that personally. I just have the problem with calling it TRT and pretending it's the same thing 95% of guys who are going to their doctor and doing this are doing, because it's not. It's not the same thing. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.